The night my brother-in-law toasted to a future built on my family's cabin, he had no idea he was celebrating inside a house he didn't own, and that by morning, his entire life would start collapsing. To the future! Tyler roared, lifting a glass of my father's 20-year-old single malt like it already belonged to him. The fire cracked in the stone hearth, throwing long shadows across the timber walls of our ancestral cabin. This place wasn't just wood and stone. It was memory. It was my mother's laugh echoing off the beams. It was my father teaching us how to stack firewood straight. It was home. I got the final permits approved this morning, Tyler announced, loud enough to own the room. We rip out this dusty old interior, put in glass walls, heated floors, modern finishes. By spring, we flip this place for a $780,000 profit. My father clapped him on the back like he'd just crowned a king. My sister Sarah looked at her husband with pure awe, like he'd single-handedly saved our family. And I sat in the corner, wrapped in a gray sweater, holding a lukewarm coffee, saying nothing. Because what Tyler didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the deed to this cabin had been sitting in a fireproof safe in my apartment for 5 years. And my name was the only one on it. The cheering inside the cabin wasn't just happiness, it was relief. My father saw Tyler's loud vision as salvation. A way to turn a stagnant asset into a legacy. He looked at the flashy suit, the booming voice, the promises made without hesitation, and saw competence. Then he looked at me. Quiet still, observing, and he saw nothing. Just Ashley, the accountant, the one without vision. My phone buzzed against my thigh. One sharp vibration that cut straight through the noise. I glanced down, shielding the screen. Unknown number. Are you Ashley? This is Antonio. I'm standing outside your cabin and your brother-in-law owes me $18,000. My stomach dropped. My face didn't change. Years of forensic accounting teach you one rule early: never show your cards until the trap is set. I stood up quietly and slipped out through the French doors onto the porch. The cold mountain air hit me like a slap. Snow was falling heavy, thick flakes drifting into the dark pine forest. Everything was silent out here. Honest. I looked back through the glass. My father was pouring Tyler another drink. Sarah was laughing, her hand on Tyler's arm. A perfect picture of a happy family, anchored to a lie. And standing there, in the snow, I finally let myself ask the question I'd buried for years. Why? Why do people like my father trust the loud liar over the quiet door? Families like ours fall into this trap all the time. We mistake confidence for competence. We mistake silence for absence. Tyler was a performer. He filled rooms with noise and energy and the appearance of success. And because he demanded attention, he got respect. I demanded nothing. I fixed problems in the dark. I paid bills quietly. I made disasters disappear without applause. And because I made it look easy, my father assumed there were no problems at all. I typed back, I'm outside. I'm coming down. I wasn't just walking into the snow to meet a contractor. I was walking out of the role they'd assigned me. The quiet daughter was done. The forensic accountant was clocking in. The next morning, I sat in a cracked vinyl booth at the only diner in town, watching steam rise from a black coffee I hadn't touched. Antonio walked in 2 minutes late, exhausted, holding a thick manila folder like it weighed more than paper. He didn't look like a scammer. He looked like a man who trusted the wrong person. He slid into the booth and pushed his phone toward me. He said he wanted an open concept. Antonio said, voice rough. So we started demolition yesterday. I looked at the photo and forgot how to breathe. The great room was gutted. The hand-hewn timber beams my mother used to trace with her fingers while she read by the fire, gone. Ripped out. Tossed into a dumpster like trash. Tyler hadn't renovated the cabin. He'd erased it. He'd destroyed our history to make room for something soulless that would look good in a listing photo. The anger in my chest wasn't hot. It was absolute zero. I opened my bag and slid my own folder across the table. Antonio, I said calmly, Tyler Collins does not own that cabin. He never has. I placed the deed in front of him. Date stamped 5 years ago. My name is on it, I said. I bought it. His eyes widened as he read. When my mom died. My father stopped opening his mail. I continued. The bank was 3 weeks from foreclosure. Sarah and Tyler were too busy living loud, expensive lives to notice. So I stepped in. I didn't tell him how I emptied my savings, how I paid the arrears quietly, how I transferred the title into my name to protect it from creditors, how I let my father keep believing it was the family cabin, because taking his dignity felt cruel. I had been the silent investor in their happiness for 5 years. And this was my repayment. He lied to you, I said. And he destroyed my property. Antonio swallowed hard. He owes me $18,000. He owes a lot more than that, I said. But right now, he's about to find out the landlord is home. I drove back down the mountain with evidence on the passenger seat, and a single thought in my mind. Before I ended him legally, I had to give my sister one last chance. We met at a coffee shop near her house. Sarah walked in glowing, buzzing with manic excitement, the kind that comes right before everything crashes. "Can you believe it?" she said, grabbing my hands. "Pre-sale interest is insane. We're finally going to be rich." "Sarah," I said quietly, pulling my hands back. "Tyler is destroying the cabin." She laughed it off. "He's updating it. You always hate change. He doesn't own it," I said. "And he hasn't paid the contractor." Her smile faltered, then hardened. "He's managing cash flow. You wouldn't understand. You're so risk-averse." "I understand he forged permits," I said. "And he's $18,000 in debt." Then she said the words that froze my blood. "We took out a second mortgage." I stared at her. "To bridge the gap," she added defensively. "Tyler said we needed skin in the game." She had put her children's home on the line for a lie. "He lied to you," I said softly. She stood up, furious. "You're just jealous. Stay out of our way." She walked out, and in that moment my sister was gone. Only the forensic accountant remained. I didn't cry. I went home and worked. Asset searches, credit histories, legal databases. Tyler Collins wasn't successful. He was drowning. $57,000 in unsecured debt. Gambling losses. Maxed out cards. A luxury car lease he couldn't afford. The cabin wasn't a business plan. It was a last-ditch life raft, and then I drove back to the cabin. Inside it was chaos. I went straight to the master bedroom. The painting above the fireplace was gone. The wall safe behind it open, empty. My mother's jewelry gone. That was the moment it crossed from fraud to theft. I called the police. "I need to report a burglary," I said. "And I know exactly who did it." 2 hours later, snow poured down as Tyler tried to sell the cabin one last time to an investor. I walked in with officers behind me, dropped the deed, the forged permits, the pawn receipts, and watched his world implode. When they put the cuffs on him, the cabin went silent. A week later, Antonio was restoring the beams Tyler tried to destroy. My father sat by the fire, broken. "I see you now?" he whispered. And for the first time in my life, I believed him. Sometimes the quietest people hold the most power. And sometimes the quietest revenge is the most complete. The trial didn't happen the way Tyler always said trials happened. There were no dramatic speeches, no clever loopholes, no last-minute miracles, just paper dates, signatures, numbers that didn't lie. Tyler pled not guilty at first. Of course he did. Men like him always believe confidence can bend reality. He told his lawyer it was a misunderstanding, that the permits were progress, that the jewelry was collateral, that I was overreacting. But forensic truth doesn't care about charm. The forged permits traced back to a template he downloaded online. The pawn receipts had his signature and thumbprint. The contractor text showed months of deliberate deception. The deed ended every argument before it started. The judge didn't look impressed. He looked tired. Tired of men who gamble with other people's lives and call it vision. Tyler was convicted of fraud, forgery, and grand larceny. 3 charges, 1 pattern. When the sentence was read, Sarah sat 2 rows behind me. She didn't cry. She didn't reach for him. She just stared straight ahead like someone waking up from a long, expensive dream. Later, in the hallway, she finally spoke. "I didn't want to believe you," she said quietly. "Because believing you meant admitting I married a lie." I nodded. "Not forgiving. Not punishing, just acknowledging reality." "I'll help you," I said. "But I won't lie for you." That was the new rule. Sarah moved in with me temporarily. We sat up late some nights, not talking about Tyler, but about how silence can look like weakness until it saves your life. The second mortgage was painful, but manageable. We renegotiated. Structured payments. No drama, no miracles. Just math. The cabin was restored slowly. Beam by beam, nail by nail. I kept the old wood. I kept the scars. Because history doesn't need to be erased to be valuable. One evening, months later, my father stood beside me on the deck as the sun dipped behind the trees. "I spent my life rewarding noise," he said, "and ignoring protection." I didn't respond right away. "You don't owe me anything," I finally said. "But don't mistake silence again." He nodded. He hasn't made that mistake since. Tyler wrote me a letter from prison once. 6 pages, all excuses. I didn't read past the first paragraph. Some stories don't deserve an audience. Now, when the cabin fills with quiet, real quiet, the kind that feels safe, I make coffee and sit where no one notices. And I smile. Because the loudest man in the room lost everything trying to look powerful, and the quiet woman he underestimated never had to raise her voice at all. Years passed. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just steadily. The way real healing always does. The cabin never became a glass box with heated floors and soulless walls. It stayed what it was meant to be. Timber, stone, memory. I kept the beams my mother loved. I refinished them myself on weekends, hands sore, mind calm. Every scrape of sandpaper felt like reclaiming something Tyler tried to erase. Sarah rebuilt her life slowly. She went back to work, learned how to read contracts. Asked questions she used to avoid because they felt negative. Some nights she cried in the guest room. Some mornings she laughed again. Growth doesn't arrive all at once, it arrives in pieces. My father stopped talking about big ideas. Instead, he asked quiet questions. How much does this cost? What's the risk? What happens if it fails? The first time he asked my opinion in front of other people, I didn't react. I just answered. Calm. Precise, unimpressed by my own correctness. That was the real shift, not apologies, not tears, respect. One winter afternoon, I found the old guest book my mother kept tucked into a drawer. Names, dates, messages written by people who stayed here long before Tyler ever touched the place. I added one line at the end. Protected, preserved, still standing. Sometimes people ask me why I pressed charges. Why I didn't handle it privately, to keep the family together. Here's the truth they don't like. Family isn't kept together by silence. It's destroyed by it. Tyler didn't fall because I exposed him. He fell because he was hollow. All I did was stop holding him up. Now when I sit by the fire at night, there's no cheering. No toasts. No promises of fast money, just the crackle of wood. The weight of truth. The quiet that used to make them overlook me. The quiet that saved everything. And every once in a while, when the snow falls just right and the forest goes still, I think about how close we came to losing it all. Then I take a slow breath. And I'm grateful I stayed silent long enough to strike once and end it forever. There's one more thing people never ask about. What it cost me. Not financially. I'd already paid that price years earlier, quietly, without witnesses. What it really cost was the comfort of being underestimated. Because once people see what you're capable of, they never look at you the same way again. The cabin changed how my family spoke around me. Conversations paused when I entered the room. Decisions were suddenly run by Ashley first. Not because I demanded it, but because they finally understood what silence had been covering all along. Power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits. Tyler was sentenced to time he still insists was unfair. From what I've heard, he tells anyone who'll listen that I ruined his life. That I was vindictive, cold, calculated. He's right about one thing. I was calculated. Because calculation is what you do when you're responsible for protecting people who don't even know they're in danger. I never celebrated his downfall. I never smiled when the verdict was read. I never felt joy watching him led away. What I felt was something quieter. Relief. Relief that the bleeding had stopped. Relief that the lies no longer had oxygen. Relief that my sister's children would sleep under a roof that was still theirs. One evening. Months later, Sarah stood beside me on the porch, watching the trees sway in the wind. I didn't know how much you were carrying, she said. I didn't carry it alone, I replied. I carried it silently. She nodded, understanding at last the difference. The cabin still holds laughter now. But it's different, softer, honest. No one talks about flipping it. No one talks about profit margins or market timing. They talk about memories. They talk about staying. And when I sit alone by the fire, I think about how easily this story could have ended differently. How one unchecked ego nearly erased a family's past and future in a single season. People think revenge has to be loud, explosive, cruel. But the most devastating revenge I've ever witnessed came from patience, preparation, and truth delivered at the exact right moment. I didn't destroy Tyler. I simply stopped protecting him from himself. And in the end, that was enough. So if you're the quiet one in the room, the observer, the fixer, the one everyone overlooks, remember this. Silence is not weakness, patience is not fear, and power doesn't need an audience. Sometimes it just needs timing. The last time I went up to the cabin alone, it was early morning. No snow, no drama. Just mist lifting off the trees and sunlight slipping through the branches like it was careful not to wake anyone. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. And for the first time since all of this began, I felt something settle completely. Peace. Not the fragile kind that comes from pretending everything is fine. The solid kind that comes from knowing nothing is hidden anymore. I walked through each room slowly. The restored beams. The stone hearth. The small imperfections Tyler tried to erase but couldn't. Every mark told the truth. Every scar meant survival. I stopped in front of the fireplace and opened the wall safe. The jewelry was still there. Untouched. Exactly where it belonged. I didn't take anything out. I didn't need to. Just knowing it was safe was enough. People think winning looks like applause. Like public validation. Like standing over someone else's ruins. But real victory is quieter than that. It's sleeping through the night without checking your phone. It's knowing your family is safe, even when they don't fully understand how. It's walking away without explaining yourself, because the outcome speaks for you. Tyler wanted to be remembered as a visionary. Instead, he became a cautionary tale. My father learned that loud confidence isn't leadership. My sister learned that love without accountability is dangerous. And I learned something about myself that I'll never forget. I don't need to be seen to be effective. I don't need permission to protect what matters. And I don't need noise to hold power. As I locked the door and stepped back onto the deck, the wind moved through the trees, low and steady. The same way it always had. The cabin wasn't flipped. The family wasn't broken. The legacy wasn't stolen. Because when the moment came, the quiet one stood up. And once was enough. After that morning, nothing dramatic happened. And that was the point. No more crisis. No more late night calls. No more cleaning up someone else's mess while being told I was overreacting. Life settled into something almost unfamiliar. Stable. Months later, the court ordered restitution. The pawned jewelry had already been recovered. But Tyler was still required to pay damages for the destruction inside the cabin, and the debt he left behind. It wasn't enough to undo what he'd done, but it was enough to close the ledger. For someone like him, numbers are the only language that finally lands. Sarah eventually moved into her own place. Smaller, modest, honest. The kids adjusted faster than any of us expected. Children always know when something toxic has left the room. Even if they can't name it. One night, after they were asleep, Sarah sat across from me at the kitchen table, and said something I'll never forget. "I thought love meant believing someone no matter what," she said. "I didn't realize real love asks questions." I nodded. That lesson cost her years. It almost cost her everything. My father changed too in his own quiet way. He stopped interrupting people, stopped dismissing details. When someone spoke softly, he leaned in instead of tuning out. He started asking me to explain things, not because he doubted me, but because he trusted me. That trust came late. But it came. Every once in a while, someone brings up Tyler's name. A distant relative. An old friend who heard a version of the story twisted to make him the victim. I don't correct them. Truth doesn't need defending when it's documented, signed, and sealed in court records. And I don't need closure from him. I already have it. Closure isn't an apology. Closure is safety. Closure is control returned to the right hands. The cabin still stands. Not as an investment, not as a trophy, but as proof. Proof that quiet people are often the ones holding everything together while everyone else is busy talking. Proof that patience isn't passivity. That preparation isn't paranoia. That silence, used correctly, is leverage. So if you ever find yourself sitting in the corner of a room while someone louder takes credit for things they don't own, remember this. Watch. Wait. Document everything. Because when the truth finally enters the room, it doesn't shout. It ends the conversation. And when it does, the quiet ones are the only ones still standing.